Thank you, Adira, for having me here this evening. I'll start by acknowledging the traditional territory of the Secwepemc peoples, whose land I'm calling in from today. That may more commonly be known as 150 Mile House, or maybe not so commonly known, but we're here about 6 hours outside of Vancouver. So I have 5 minutes to talk to you about a hugely complex topic about reconciliation as it relates to Indigenous and non-Indigenous Canadians. So I wanted to start off by asking you, have you ever wondered what it looks like to be a part of the reconciliation movement in Canada? And I'm hoping your answer is yes. And if it isn't, I hope it is by the end of my short share today. Being mixed heritage, as Adira shared, settler and First Peoples, colonizer and colonized, this has been my lifelong journey to reconcile both of my ethnicities. When I was little, I saw my Indigenous heritage as a liability, something to hide, something to be ashamed of. I couldn't articulate why at that age, but I held a lot of shame and was a child that just wanted to fit in and not be seen as different. I remember seeing images of Indigenous peoples in social studies class in elementary school, and the images were of Indigenous people barely wearing anything and depicted as savages. And also the children that I went to school with laughing at natives. And when the native assistant teacher came to get me every Wednesday to make dream catchers in the cold basement of the elementary school, all the kids would ask me, "Why do you go with her? Are you Native? Are your family members drunks?" And I just did not resonate with any of what was being depicted or perceived about who I was. So I just did my best to blend in throughout my youth, and just sort of tucked my Indigenous heritage off to the side. But as I grew up and graduated high school and moved to the city to pursue a post-secondary education, I became more informed on Indigenous peoples and my own heritage and the cultural diversity that we have in Canada. I started to question the dominant narrative that exists on the lands now called Canada about Indigenous peoples. I started to actually wonder, are Indigenous peoples all drunks? Are they all drug addicted? Are they all lazy? Are they less than human? Are they not civilized? And as I became to form my own narrative and worldview and lived experience with Indigenous peoples, leaders, women, elders, and knowledge keepers, and travel all around the province, as Adira said, to over 100 communities, I learned about our rich and diverse cultures, our languages, lands, traditions, and most importantly, our strength and resiliency. Each visit to the community, each conversation with an elder, each conversation with a strong leader, I began to embrace my heritage more and continue to apply a critical lens to what is shared about Indigenous people in the media and in mainstream Canada about who Indigenous peoples are. As my personal life became more about learning and unlearning these truths that we embrace in Canada about Indigenous peoples that we may or may not be conscious of, my professional life naturally moved more into the reconciliation space. And now, as Adira said, I've been running my consulting business for 10 years as a reconciliation practitioner, and I weave my Indigenous traditions and knowledge and worldviews into my yoga business as a yin yoga and Kundalini yoga teacher. I saw the Kundalini yoga teacher, so yay Kundalini. I've also learned that reconciliation is for all of us, no matter what race, religion, class, or ethnicity. I often get asked by many non-Indigenous peoples, how do I become a part of the reconciliation movement? Is wearing a Cowichan sweater cultural appropriation? Am I allowed to wear beaded earrings? What are reserves? I get asked all these really basic questions about embracing Indigenous culture. And so I'm here to tell you tonight that reconciliation and being and embracing Indigenous cultures is for all of us. Each of our individual paths to reconciliation will look and feel different depending on who we are. However, in order for Canada to be able to reconcile its colonial past and its current colonial reality and its mistreatment and legislative oppression of the First Peoples on this land now called Canada, it's going to take all of us. We don't have time to wait for the government to achieve this for us. We have a wonderful opportunity as Canadians to embrace this opportunity to contribute to the reconciliation movement in a meaningful way. Just as I hid my Indigenous culture, Canada has done that for several generations, for over 150 years, in great efforts to hide its Indigenous peoples and culture. Now is the time facing this generation to start to embrace Indigenous peoples and the reconciliation movement. It doesn't have to be a grandiose gesture, although it can be if you have the time and resources to do so, but it can be small, like reading Indigenous authors, seeking out Indigenous films, reading the Truth and Reconciliation Commission final report and the 94 calls to action, calling on all Canadians to be a part of the reconciliation movement, or getting educated on the thousands of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls and gender diverse individuals in this country. It could also just be questioning what you have thought to be true about Indigenous peoples and seeking out other alternative narratives. It can all start now by committing to one meaningful action. And it can even be questioning your thoughts, hosting a dinner party when we're out of COVID and have questions about reconciliation on everybody's plate. It can be going to your neighboring Indigenous community and introducing yourself as the neighbor and saying you want to be a part of the movement. All of these small things add up to us as the current generation in Canada, embracing Indigenous people's culture and the reconciliation movement so that we can change how we are together in relationship. And the time is now, and we're the generation that is faced with this opportunity more so than other generations, as we know more now, and we're coming together more now. And I encourage you to continue to either continue on your journey of reconciliation or to commit to one action tonight. So thank you, Adira, for inviting me here to speak about reconciliation, all my relations.